This time on Classic Motorcycle A to Z, it's the letter L.
Lovely, isn't it? Give me a second.
So I'm going to be spending the next couple of months on a major adventure. This doesn't mean we're going to leave you without content though. We're putting together a series of videos which we're calling Classic Motorcycle A to Z. So basically we're going to run through the alphabet and give some history and information about various classic motorcycle companies as we go. Now the inclusion of Lambretta may seem a little controversial. Some people don't regard them as motorcycles, but there's two wheels and an engine, so I'm afraid you're just going to have to move on emotionally. Although born in Pescia in Italy, Ferdinando Innocenti established his first steel tubing factory in Rome. And in 1931 he took the business to Milan, where he built a larger factory producing seamless steel tubing, and this employed about 6,000 people. Where not surprisingly, being a large factory in the middle of a large industrial complex, the factory was bombed heavily during the Second World War. During the war and immediately afterwards, Italy would be teeming with American GIs riding around on Cushman scooters, which had been made in Nebraska and the United States. And while by no means the first scooters ever produced, these had a great influence on Italian industry, with many companies seeing them as a viable proposition for transport in war-torn Italy. Innocenti himself considered this to be a fairly good way of getting his factory up and running again. So he employed aeronautical engineer Corradino di Asconio, who had previously been responsible for the design of the first Augusta helicopter incidentally, to design a scooter which could be built at the Innocenti factory. And his design bristled with what would later be pretty much standard scooter design features, such as a pass-through leg area, leg shields, small wheels, and a front fork design which resembled that of an aircraft, and which importantly featured what was essentially monocoque construction. And this would be a problem, because Innocenti was a steel tube maker, which left Innocenti somewhat less than impressed with the final design. And so Asconio left to turn his design into what would later be the Vespa for Piaggio. And so Innocenti would bring in Cesare Pallavicino and Pier Luigi Torri to come up with a design which is more steel tubular based. And despite the somewhat war-torn nature of the factory, Innocenti were able to bring the first Lambretta to market as early as 1947. But as impressive as this achievement was, they were still a year behind Piaggio and the Vespa. But with its more stable handling, the Lambretta was an instant success, and would go on to be produced in countries such as Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, India and Spain under licence, and sometimes rebadged for different markets too, such as the Ciambretta in South America and Cervetta in Spain. And in the United States, just like Benelli, the machines would be sold mail order by Montgomery Ward, under its Riverside brand name. But unfortunately for Lambretta, as the rest of Europe would find, as people gradually got more money in their pockets in the post-war era, they moved towards cheaper cars and away from motorcycles. And as early as 1961, some of the Innocenti factory was being employed in the production of minis under licence, with a scooter manufacturing engine at the Innocenti factory in 1972. The Linto motorcycle was designed and built by Lino Tonti in 1967 and uses what is effectively an Air Mackie Harley-Davidson based engine. The machine's best year was 1969 when it placed second in the 250 World Championship, with 1972 being its final year, by which time Tonti himself had moved to Moto Guzzi. Levis was a small British motorcycle manufacturer which began production in 1911. They were best known for their small lightweight two-strokes which they introduced from 1916 onwards, and a 247cc version would win the lightweight TT in 1920 and 1922. From 1928 onwards they would produce a range of four-stroke singles ranging from 250 to 600ccs. Production would cease at the dawn of World War II and not start again, although there have been recent efforts to bring the name back to life. Laverda began life as a producer of agricultural machinery in 1873, and this would remain the case for 75 years, until 1947 when Francesco Laverda, grandson of the company's founder, employed engineer Luciano Zen to design a lightweight motorcycle. The fruit of the labours was a simple 75cc 4-stroke motorcycle with girder forks and fully enclosed chain drive, and would form the basis of Laverda's successful lightweights for the next few years. In 1951, the still new company entered its first road race, the Milan Taranto, with a little 75cc machine finishing 4th, 6th, 7th and 10th in their class. However, the following year would prove even better, with machines from Laverda taking the top 5 places. And over the next couple of decades, their small single-cylinder engine gradually grew to 200cc's. But by the late 60s, it was increasingly obvious that Laverda would need to develop a larger machine if it was going to survive in the face of declining sales as cheap cars increasingly came onto the market. And so by 1966, the company had developed a 650cc parallel twin designed by Luciano Zen, but looking rather like a Honda. In 1968, we see the parallel twin engine enlarged to 750cc, with fewer than 200 of the 650s ever being completed. The 750 would be evolved throughout the 70s, culminating in the SFC, a higher performance version which boasted 60 horsepower. But even bigger things were to come when in 1969 Laverda unveiled a prototype of their 1000cc 3-cylinder machine. Unlike the final machine, the prototype was essentially based on the single-cylinder 750 unit and featured a single overhead cam and a 120 crank spacing. However, by the time the 3C engine reached production, it featured dual overhead cams and a 180-degree crank spacing, although it would revert back to 120 towards the end of its lifespan. The first 3C would reach production in 1973 and claimed 85 horsepower at 7,250 rpm for a top speed of around 130. The most famous version of the triple was the Jota, of course, inspired by Slater Brothers in the UK. It boasted 90 horsepower and had a top speed of just over 137 miles an hour, as tested by Superbike magazine in the UK. And there would be a 1200 sports touring version in 1978 called the Mirage. By the early 80s, Laverda were beginning to struggle in the face of Japanese opposition. Hope you enjoyed that video and found it interesting. Look out, there will be more videos in the series coming soon. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.